Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mayorkas, good to get a chance to visit with you again. We visited multiple times on this. And a lot of times that we've talked to you, laid out a new strategy, a new plan. I mean, the numbers you know well, of the dramatic increase in the number of people crossing our border without a lawful authorization to be able to do so. That has continued to accelerate. Unfortunately, from last month to this month, that's continued to increase again. We've talked about it multiple times. You've laid out different ideas. Here's a new strategy we're going to have. Here's a new strategy we're going to have. Each one hasn't slowed the flow down on it. You have laid out from the department a new strategy again that you hope to have implemented. The comment period is ended on that. It is the circumvention of lawful pathways regulation. It's out there. The comment period is now closed. You're going through those reviews. When will that be implemented?
Thank you, Senator. If I may, because you said that, if I understood you correctly, that none of the measures that we have taken have reduced the flows. Actually, the measures that we announced and implemented on January 5th with respect to individuals originating from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela has led to a more than 95% drop in the number of encounters of individuals from those four countries at our southern border. So that is a model of building lawful pathways as well as delivering consequences.
But as you and I both know, the numbers continue to climb. Total numbers from those countries, the numbers have dropped dramatically, but the total numbers continue to go up. For this fiscal year, for just the 6 months of this fiscal year, it's about 160,000 higher than last year. Last year was 1 million more higher than the year before. So the numbers still continue to climb, total numbers. So what I'm trying to figure out is for this circumvention of lawful pathways regulation that you're planning to implement across the board, do you expect this 95% reduction that you've seen in those identified countries after it's implemented? And if so, when is it going to be implemented?
Senator, we are adjudicating the comments that were received. There were many, many comments received in response to our notice of proposed rulemaking. And so it's very difficult during a comment period to talk about the promulgation of a final rule. It is our intention to promulgate a final rule unless there are certain comments that dissuade us from doing so. That is not where we stand right now. We are moving as quickly as possible to adjudicate the public comments, and that notice of proposed rulemaking, as well as what we announced on January 5th, reflects an overarching strategy of building lawful pathways so that people who qualify for relief can actually reach the United States in an orderly and safe way, consistent with the law, and then as a complement to that, deliver consequences to those who do not avail themselves of the lawful pathways. That's the model that has worked in the past, that we intend to build upon, and we are indeed building upon.
So you have mentioned in the past that the asylum system, or that the system is broken. This new rule that you're promulgating at this point deals directly with the asylum process on this. Is it your assumption that the asylum process itself is broken, that is being abused?
Senator, yes, the asylum system is broken and our entire immigration system is broken. I think there is unanimity about that, and it is our continuing hope that Congress will reform a broken system.
Is part of that the credible fear standard? Part of that the credible fear standard, is that part that is actually broken as well? And if so, what would your recommendation be? What do you need at that point?
I think that the credible fear standard needs to be reviewed in the context of reviewing the entire asylum system. One of the most fundamental problems that we have sought to address through a regulation is the fact that the time in between when an individual actually first claims credible fear, the initial threshold in an asylum case, and the time of final adjudication of their asylum claim is historically been more than 4 years, and that reflects a broken system.
Yeah, it's a very broken system. When I've gone through some of the numbers on this, and it is my concern, and through your budget documents on it, let me just give you some of the numbers here that your team has released out that's made publicly available on this. For the alternatives to detention, the backlog that's there actually getting to this next step from ICE. If they've received a notice to report or the parole plus attorneys of detention backlog, if they request to go to New York, currently, right now, their next hearing time in New York is in March of 2033. So it is 10 years before they get that hearing, and that's not the final adjudication of it, as you know well. That's just the ICE portion of it, and then they get in line to go after that. So we could be 15 to 18 years before this asylum system is actually, before their asylum claim is actually adjudicated. Part of my struggle on this is when I visit with USCIS folks on this, if they're in the non-detained docket, which I have a whole legal question on that, if they're in the non-detained docket, they're not getting to them at all because their priority is on the detained docket, rightfully so, because that's where the law requires them to be able to do. But the non-detained docket, they're not getting to, don't know when they're going to get to. ICE has hearings set 10 years into the future to get to the first step of this process for them. This is clearly not working in the process. And on top of all of that, I was shocked to see in your budget request a reduction in requests for new detention space or maintaining detention space. So while we have got this incredible backlog in the non-detained docket, you're actually requesting fewer spaces when we have an acceleration of the number of people here. What am I missing?
Four responses, if I may. Number one, we are not seeking a reduction in detention space. What we have done is place the funding for additional detention space in a contingency fund so that we could draw upon it if and when the number of encounters require additional detention of individuals. So we have moved it to a contingency fund for the reasons I outlined in my opening remarks.
But then that could be used for other things at this point. But the detention numbers should be at epic levels, historic numbers. So I'm a little confused why we may need to flex that to other things when even your testimony earlier said we anticipate after Title 42 ends, we will see a surge again of individuals. So there's an anticipation of a surge of more individuals coming across the border, yet you've moved the detention dollars to a contingency fund to say we may or may not need those.
Well, that's speaking of fiscal year 2024, not fiscal year 2023. We are hopeful that the measures that we are taking will diminish the number of encounters at our southern border. The proposed rulemaking to which you referred originally, building upon the success of the program we announced and implemented on January 5th. It is our continuing hope that Congress will reform our immigration system. And Senator, with respect to your other points, the time in between encounter and final adjudication has plagued our immigration system for years and years and years. It is why we are also seeking funding for more asylum officers. And this administration, for the first time, took action to reduce that time lapse by issuing a regulation that gave the authority to asylum officers to make the final asylum adjudication and bring that multi-year timeline down to under a year. The first administration to do so.
Great.